Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Welcome once again to Mindset Shift. The goal is still the same for us to start thought provoking conversations so that your mindset, my mindset too, can be shifted and changed to possibly contribute to the society and make sure that there is impact that is achieved. Today, we're going to talk about something we've been talking about in the past episodes, but we want to stretch it a bit more and find out how to make sure that it continues to go and how you can utilize it to benefit you and to grow you so that you can get to a point where you can now impact society. Today, we're going to talk about growth. In previous episodes, we spoke of how growth is something that occurs as an individual continues to look for what they lost until they eventually grow into a crown they're supposed to get. But today, we want to also stretch it a bit and also talk about how growth is you managing to maintain your hunger. Where there is no hunger, there is no growth. It is very important for us to understand that growth can only be necessitated when hunger remains. This is why you see that the first thing that they check from a healthy child when the child is born is to check the hunger of that particular child, which is why we will see that from the time a child is born, they will continue to grow and continue to grow. Because every time when they have hunger, not only is hunger showing that there is life, but hunger is also met with a complete meal. And that particular meal will continue to grow that individual because they have hunger. So you will stop growing in any particular field the day that you lose your hunger, be it spiritually, be it physically, be it in business. It is very important that you analyze the hunger that you have in this particular season and you make sure that you continuously feed yourself based on the hunger that you're particularly getting. But why is hunger so important and why is growth more important? Because the day that we stop growing, we start dying. Dr. Miles Monroe says that when we stop learning, we start dying because our mindset has been built in such a way that it will continue to evolve, it will continue to grow, and it will continue to see better possibilities that are outside there, but only if you continue feeding it. What maintains the feeding cycle is the hunger that you have as an individual. The loss of that particular hunger eventually then builds a state of stagnation in your particular life, and where there is stagnation, an individual stops to grow. Now, how then is hunger maintained? Hunger only occurs when there is space that can be taken upon, and that space is then infiltrated with information that then brings what we call growth. So it means that for you to have hunger, you ought to create capacity. You ought to build capacity. And it's the extent of your capacity that is going to show how much hunger you have and henceforth how much of growth we can put in that particular capacity so that you as an individual become impactful. So it's important for us to also address the issue of capacity building. We want to show you in this particular episode that the capacity that you have is actually going to determine even how much you achieve and how your life is going to go in a particular area. Meaning to say that where you lack capacity, you cannot achieve certain things. So your inability to obtain results is your inability to build the capacity that can hold those particular results. Meaning to say that results are not void of people to go to, but what's void is the capacity that individuals are willing to build so that they can take in those particular results. So it's important for you to understand that as you build capacity, the space that is created within capacity eventually is what is realized as hunger. And that particular hunger now requires you to fill in that particular space. And as you fill in that particular space, you begin to evolve and you begin to grow. Now, growth does not stop until eventually an individual dies. Because as long as you are still able to create capacity for yourself, it means that there are multiple things that you are able to achieve. The man that started KFC was about 65 when he managed to make KFC something that is globally recognized. One would say that at his particular age, he would have lost the hunger for him to try to build wealth. He would have lost the stamina that is required for you to run a successful business. But because Harlan Sanders had maintained the hunger that he was supposed to have, he managed to have KFC running, that today it's a franchise that we all love and a franchise that we know very well. But this was started by a man who was almost reaching his time of death. But because he continued to be hungry, because he continued to have his capacity that was within him, at that particular time, he is still able to achieve that, which some individuals even fail to achieve at the age of 20. So hunger will also tell you that it's not about time, but it's about the capacity that you build within that particular time that is going to determine the results that you're going to have. Now, we're going to look at a very famous story that we find in the Bible, where we have a woman that approaches the man of God, who was Elisha in this particular instance. This woman approaches the man of God, and she says rather, that the husband had died. But when the husband died, he had a lot of debts that he had. And the people that were being owed were about to come so that they take the children of that woman and take the children as servants. So what we see here is this woman had a particular problem. This woman was going through a particular problem. And when she goes to the man of God looking for a particular solution, remember, when we go into the Old Testament, whenever a man or a woman approached a man of God, the man of God was a representation of God in that particular generation. Meaning to say that people believed that as they approach a man of God, they are able to get exactly what God wants to say and how God wants to address a particular situation at a particular time. So this woman faces a particular problem and she needs an answer. When she goes to the man of God, she explains the problem that she has. But what the man of God does at that particular time is something that then brings about a mystery that we ought to capture, and a mystery that can work for us and change our lives dramatically. The man of God says, "What can I do for you?" That was the first question that he asked. The second question that he immediately asks before the lady responds is, "What do you have?" Now, these two questions are very fundamental. The way this woman was going to respond from this particular position was going to determine how her life was going to be transformed. The first question that she was asked, "What can I do for you?" That particular question was addressed to the problem that she was facing. So sometimes you can be facing a particular issue, and when you are asked, "What can we do for you?" your mindset and your perception allows you to respond to the current problem that you're facing. But you fail to understand that above the problem you're currently facing, there is a life after that. So the first question, if she had answered the first question, she would have responded based on the debt that she was going through. But she would have not thought as to what they were going to do outside the debt. Because remember, this woman had lost the breadwinner. If you lost the breadwinner, it means that even the sustenance of your life thereafter becomes a problem. The second question now is a very important question where the man of God says, "What is it that you have?" Meaning to say that these two responses are going to address your problem in a different way. If she had responded to the first question, her problem was going to be addressed, but her life was going to remain in a mediocre state. But the second question was a question that was going to provide a formula upon which she could recreate a miracle that was not only going to pay off the debt, but that was going to sustain her for years to come. This is where we get to understand the importance of capacity. But capacity begins when you understand the question that the man of God asked, where he says, "What is it that you have?" As an individual in your life right now, you may be looking for a particular miracle. You may be looking for a particular problem in your life to be addressed. But the answer to that particular problem is not always whether your problem can be addressed. But the question is, what is it that you have, and what is it that you have been given that is within your hands? That is the first step in understanding how to transform yourself from the problem that you're facing. The problem that you are facing is not an issue at the moment, but the issue is, how will you address the problem and sustain yourself thereafter? So the question was, what is it that you have? Now, the answer the lady gives is an answer that most of us give in this particular generation, where when we're asked, "What is it that we have?" we look at things around us and we look at them as menial possessions. Because this woman says, "I only have but a bottle of oil," which means in her mindset, the bottle of oil was not enough to address the problem she was facing. Henceforth, she looked at the bottle of oil as something that could not address a problem and something that could not transform her life. But what she did not know was, in the small that she was given and what she had in her hands was the answer to the problem that she was facing. The next thing she is told to do after she says, "I only have but a bottle of oil," was she was told, "Go therefore and borrow vessels." Go therefore and borrow vessels. Now, these vessels, when she was now understanding why she was told to borrow them, these vessels were going to be the vessels upon which the small bottle of oil was going to begin to be poured within those particular vessels. So the miracle that arises from what was small or what she thought was not significant was that very oil was now going to be poured in vessels that she had borrowed, and the oil was going to continue flowing in these particular vessels. But a funny thing happens when she had run out of vessels. The Bible does not say that the oil ran out. The Bible speaks to us how the vessels, when they were now full, then the oil stopped. So when you are given a formula to recreate a miracle based on what you are holding, that miracle does not stop because its potential is no longer there, but it stops when it does not find room or capacity to continue flowing. So which means that it's important to understand that once you have found the small thing of value that you hold, you ought to then build enough capacity for it to keep flowing. It will stop flowing the day that it stops finding space for it to be contained in. So it's important henceforth for us as a young generation to understand that everything we go through now, we are building capacity. Once the capacity is built, the continuous assessment and the continuous hunger to build even more capacity is going to make us equipable vessels that will continue taking oil that will then flow to solve solutions. Two things that we see here. What is it of value that you have? The second thing, how much capacity have you built for that of value that you hold? Is it a gift? Is it an advantage? But what capacity have you built? And it's that capacity that is going to continue allowing that gift, is going to continue allowing that ability to flow. But how do we build capacity? It henceforth becomes important for us to address the issue of capacity. Capacity involves three particular levels. Number one is preparedness. You ought to be prepared for what you want to carry. Number two, containing it. You ought to be able to contain that in which you want to carry. And number three, preservation. You ought to preserve that which you desire to carry. Now, when we talk of preparedness, preparedness is a matter of time. Preparedness is a matter of process. There is nothing you desire to carry that will not take time and that will not undergo process. So time and process reveal something mysterious to us, that when it is happening, no one sees it. Only you are diligently working on it until eventually it is revealed. We see this when the man of God says to the woman, as you are pouring the oil into the vessels, shut the doors down. Which means that when you are being made, when you're going through process, no one is going to see you. You're going to be like Joseph. When Joseph was in the bushes, when Joseph was in the pit, when Joseph was in the dungeon, when Joseph was hidden, nobody knew that there is a time where he's going to arise to a leadership portfolio. And God himself is so wise that he will only reveal the palace. He will never reveal the process. The reason God never reveals the process is if he reveals the process to you, you will reject the palace. If Joseph had been told that for him to get to the palace, he had to go through the pit, he had to go through the dungeon, he had to go through being sold by his brothers, he would have rejected the palace because he would have not seen the significance of going through all that for the palace. So when you know where you are going, process is going to be hidden. So process, you have to endure it. This is when it addresses the issue of perception. Every single thing you are going through, if the destination has been shown, you have to trust and have faith that everything you are going through is a requirement for you to get where you're getting. This is the significance and the hardship of process. But this is the only way in which we become prepared. The second part is containing when we talk of capacity. Can you contain that which you want to carry? Now, when we talk of containing, we now look at the vessel itself. A potter, when they are molding a vessel, there is something that they continuously do. They continuously address cracks. They continuously address the strength of that particular vessel as they are making it. The reason they take time to significantly focus onto this is they want to make sure whatever will be placed in the vessel can contain it. So sometimes there are cracks that are developing in you as a vessel. There are cracks that are arising as pride. There are cracks that are arising as insecurity. There are cracks that are arising as failure to trust. You have to address these cracks, because if you don't address the cracks, you are actually significantly dirtying your position to be a vessel that can carry that which it wants. So where you want to go, if you are not ready to carry it, and you are not going to allow the oil that will be placed to leak, then you need to understand that the miracle can continue flowing, but you will not see the efficacy of what is flowing in if there are channels that are allowing it out. So this is when you have to address even issues with the flesh as you are going on. This is not a religious statement, neither is it just spiritual, but it is something that even in all areas and facets of business, they look at this, because there are certain character traits that ought to be addressed before the oil starts flowing. Lastly is preservation. How long can you maintain it? You can only maintain it for longer times if you have created capacity that will continue to allow the oil to keep flowing. So this is when you have to maintain your hunger. Just because you've received results, don't stop there. Just because you've started getting money, don't stop there. Just because you've started, don't stop. If you manage to address and find that the formula is in prayer, the formula is in reading, the formula is in humility, the formula is in service, do not stop these things, because the day you stop them is the day you stop the preservation of the results you have gotten. Men that have fallen will tell you that there is something they did to mess up the formula they were given when they were still starting. So sometimes when you have fallen, the reason you are falling is not because you don't deserve to be at the top. The reason you are falling is for you to go back down and recreate the possibilities you did when you were still starting. So it is important for certain individuals to actually fall. Because if they don't fall, like we spoke about in previous episodes, they will never go back to the side that this is the area where I was made. Why have I stopped doing what made me? I have to continue doing it even when the results come. So these are the three areas of capacity. How do we build capacity? In building capacity, we're going to look at the life of the eagle. We're going to look at fundamentals that occur within the life cycle of an eagle, and we are going to see how in each particular area it addresses the issue of capacity. We have spoken about this in previous episodes, but we are summing it all up so that you see the importance of building capacity. What is the first thing that we see in the life of an eagle? When an eagle gives birth, or it lays its eggs rather, it can usually lay about 2 eggs. When these 2 eggs hatch, we get 2 eaglets. These eaglets are usually equal in size. They're usually the same. But what happens is that as the older eagles, which are the parents in this instance, begin to take food from outside the nest, and they begin to bring that food so that these 2 can eat. Naturally, one of the eaglets is going to be eating, one of the eaglets is going to eat more than the other, which means that when the other eats more than the other, one is going to gain weight and becomes bigger, then the other is not going to gain weight and becomes smaller. Eventually, what happens is because of the size of the one that continues to eat, the size of it is going to give it more strength. This now means when the parents bring in more food, the one that has more strength is going to continue eating, and the one with less strength is not going to eat much. Eventually, after a while, the one that is smaller is going to die, and only one is going to survive. The reason why that one is going to survive is that one had created more capacity, hence it grew. And as it grew, it had more power, and that power was now able to make it take away what the other was supposed to receive. This is principle number 1 in life. The route in which you are willing to go and the amount of energy you're willing to take to build capacity is going to determine whether you're going to be the eaglet that eats, or you're going to be the eaglet that waits for others to leave leftovers. And when you wait for those that leave leftovers, the probability of survival is lower. So this is a challenge already, that the more capacity you build, the more say you have financially, the more say you have spiritually, the more say you have in business, the more say you have in life. Failure to build capacity so that you become this individual, you're going to be feeding over the leftovers of others, and you will not survive for long. So this already tells you that this life is a life where individuals survive based on the capacity that they would have built. Be challenged as an individual. Human beings do not clap twice for the same result. So every single day is going to be a day where you need to challenge yourself for better results. The only way for you to do that is for you to continue building capacity. Capacity is built by you doing what others are not willing to do. Capacity is built by you taking the extra mile others are not willing to take. Because the ones that are not willing to take will be the ones that will clap hands for you when you get results. But when they are clapping hands for you, what they are simply admitting is they have failed to build capacity the way you did. So they failed to get the results you got. So when you clap hands for people and you're always the one clapping and they never clap for you, just know that you are failing to build the capacity. When a man gets results, don't question the results. Question what capacity the man had to build to get the results. If you never question the capacity, you always doubt individuals' results. You don't know what they were doing in closed doors. That's why in Africa, we don't appreciate rich men. Every person with money, we always assume they stole. The reason we always assume they stole is because our mindset is limited to think the only way to make money is by stealing. We don't understand that certain men pay the price to get what they get. First lesson that we learn from an eagle. Second lesson, the eagle always prepares the eaglets not to be comfortable. When an eagle is preparing the nest for its eaglets, what it does is it places thorns on the base of the nest. So the base of the nest has got thorns. Above those thorns, immediately it puts another layer where it now puts grass, then it begins to build the nest for the eaglets. The idea is as these eaglets begin to grow, they are going to gain weight. As they gain weight, they become heavy. As they become heavy, they start forcing or pressing the grass down. Now, those thorns that had been placed underneath, they begin to prick the eaglets. The moment they start pricking the eaglets, they now want to jump off because the sensation of pricking is painful. That's how they learn how to get out of the nest. You need to place systems in your life that are able to make sure you never get comfortable. The moment you find yourself being so comfortable in a season, just know that distraction is near. Because when you are comfortable in a season, you don't grow for the next season. When you are comfortable in summer, you don't prepare for winter that is coming that requires blankets. So you need to have a systemic approach as to what will not keep you comfortable in one area for a long time. Never, ever, ever be comfortable in anything. Never be comfortable in a relationship. Never be comfortable in a friendship. Never be comfortable in business. Always ask a question. What can I do to better myself? It is such questions that keep men going forward. I used to study the lives of rich men. Men like Elon Musk, men like Aliko Dangote. And these men, until today, they are studying. Until today, they are reading. Until today, they are assessing markets. Until today, they are questioning where's the world going? What direction is the world taking? I never used to understand why, because I believed that once you're a billionaire, you've reached the hallmark and the landmark of money. And that money can sustain you even until death and leave something for the next generation. But what I realized is the reason they are never satisfied is they know that being at the top is as temporal as your ability to continue growing whilst you are there. The day you stop growing, you'll see how painful the fall is going to be. That's why they say it hurts more to fall from the top than when you fall from the bottom. When you fall from the bottom, you dust yourself up and you continue going. But when you fall from the top, you break bones, you break limbs, and you know the pain of falling from the top. So you would rather keep yourself focused up there than when you're down. So whilst you are still down, learn this lesson. Create systemic approaches that will not keep you comfortable. Point number 3. When the eagles realize that these eaglets have reached a point where they now need to leave the nest and they are being pricked, they take the eaglet and take it to a very high position in the mountain. When they go to the very high position in that particular mountain, they drop that eaglet. They drop an eaglet that does not know how to fly. They drop an eaglet that does not know how to maneuver at that altitude. Now, this eaglet, out of fear, begins to flap its wings, begins to flap its wings, begins to flap its wings. And in the fear of dying because it is falling at a particular altitude at a very high rate. It flaps, it flaps, it flaps until it actually realizes the air goes underneath its wings. That the flapping sensation, it begins to gain altitude instead of losing altitude. It's at that time where the eaglet realizes it can fly. But for it to fly, it needed to be in an uncomfortable position. And the pain that it went through falling, fearing for its life, is what made it fly. The potential you have is already in you. What you are capable of doing is already in you. But you need certain situations that will bring it out of you. And situations that bring it out of you are not situations of comfort, are not situations that should make you feel better. But sometimes there are situations that should scare you. There are situations that should bring a certain amount of pain in you so that it allows that which is in you. This is why sometimes I doubt certain friendships. I doubt certain relationships. When you're in a friendship and in a relationship where you're constantly being told good things, there is something wrong with it. Because there are certain arrows that have to be shot, that have to pierce you, to realize that there is something in you that is better than the current rate you are. At most, if you have friends that are always telling you nice things and relationships that are always telling you good things, at most you are going to die an average man, an average woman, filled with mediocrity. But if you have people that challenge you, people that can place you in certain uncomfortable positions, you may not like them when they say it, but eventually you will reap the rewards. What is the other thing that we learn from an ego? Another thing we learn from an ego is when that particular ego is rising to certain heights. Now, an ego has got one thing no other bird has. It's the ability for vision. The ego is able to envision. It is even able to see the meal it wants to take from a very far position. So it is able to build strategies to get it even before. But the first thing it has to do, it has to fly at certain altitudes that are above everyone else. Which means that your vision is as impactful as from where you see it from. Now, in the Bible, there is a prophet that is told, or that says rather, that I will go upon high and I will wait there and sit, right, to watch and to see what the Lord will say. So sometimes for you to realize the potential that God wants to say upon your life, you have to rise upon high. It is impossible to see certain things when you see them from a position of being low. You ought to rise. For you to rise, you have to beat three fundamental issues. Number one, you need to beat your fear of heights. Number two, you need to beat your fear of mistakes. Number three, you need to build the mentality of strategy. If you fail to beat certain fears in you, you will not be able to go upon a high position to set a vision that can impact generations. How do you beat your fear of heights? How do you beat your fear of mistakes? And how do you build strategy? You build it by getting into getting dirty. What I mean by getting dirty is working. What I mean by working is you actualizing that which you want to see. Never set a vision and wait for it to manifest whilst doing nothing. That is the strategy of a fool. A fool is like that one person that waits for the rainy season to come so that they are able to start farming for food. But a wise man will build strategies in any particular season that will guarantee the next meal. So sometimes you do not have the adequate resources around you that are contributing to what you want to achieve. But in every particular situation, in every particular season, build strategies that can produce something whilst you wait for the greater season. It is in this way where you are able to sustain yourself and where you are able to survive. If you wait for summer to come whilst it's in winter, you may not make it to summer. You will die because you don't have the strength and the capacity to keep moving. So it's not going to be a time and a season where you always wait for the good times, where you always wait for the end of the vision. What are you doing now to get yourself there? As you do these things, you are building grit and you're building capacity. This then allows exactly what you want to flow, to continue flowing. The last thing that we see in an ego, I think we mentioned this in episodes 2 before this one, where we said that when an eagle has grown old, an eagle has 2 lives. After about a certain number of years, the feathers that it has that used to be an advantage, they become very heavy. Its beak, it now grows inside, so it's no longer as effective as the initial beak that it has. And its claws are now too big that it's making it too heavy for it to fly. Now it has 2 decisions that it can make. Decision number 1 is that as an eagle, it just dies because every single weight it has built becomes too heavy to a point that it cannot move forward, so it can die. Decision number 2 is that it now begins to pluck out all those old feathers. It now begins to pluck out all those claws. It now begins to hit itself through the beak on a rock so that it breaks off and allows another one to grow. This process takes quite a number of days. But as it does this very painful process, it now allows a new set of wings to be there that are not heavy. It now allows new claws that are sharper to grow from it. And it also allows a new beak that is sharper to come out, which means that it would have achieved what it achieved when it was still in its prime after so many years. So it is able to even achieve more. This process is very painful. This process is making it very uncomfortable. But the reason why it remains is because of hunger. We spoke of the issues that have to do with hunger. The hunger that it has to continue its survival quest, to continue its name as the king of the bird kingdom, happens and it's solved when it does this. So here we see that an eagle's life is a life that is consistently and constantly about challenging itself as to how to get to the next season. You cannot stop at seasons where you feel satisfied from what you desired yesterday. What you desired yesterday is the result of today. But today is also going to be waiting for new desires so that tomorrow you also receive certain things that you did not receive today. It reminds me of the last thing that I value and I love about an eagle. An eagle always looks for storms. An eagle always looks for storms. An eagle always looks for storms. Whilst every other bird runs away from the storm, the eagle always looks for storms. Why is this so? As the raging storm is moving, what the eagle does is it goes within the storms. Then it opens its wings at a particular angle and keeps it there. Now, as the winds are raging and raging and raging and pushing upon the wings of the eagle, the storm begins to remove any impurities that are stuck on the wings of the eagle. And also the storm begins to push the eagle to higher positions. So an eagle finds rest in the times of storms because it knows that the storm has come to remove chaff and raise it to the next level. When you are surrounded by problems, realize that that is the best place for you to come up with a solution that pays. Business people understand this, that when markets are failing, it is a problem to certain businesses, but it is also an answer for another business to arise. During COVID, so many businesses died down, so many businesses were closed. But for the people that were into artificial intelligence, individuals that were owning platforms like Zoom, they boomed and multiplied their wealth because of a problem that currently existed in society. Every time there is a problem, a solution is required. An eagle understands that whenever there is a problem to some birds, for it, it's a solution to get higher. When you go in with this mentality, it's a game changer, because this mentality is going to build you to the next season. If you've gone through something painful, if you're going through something painful, it is tough, it is difficult. But if you shift your perception that in these challenges, in these problems, that you are able to build capacity for you to have wider room so that the oil keeps flowing to address your miracle, you understand this. In conclusion, when this lady had finally finished pouring the oil into the vessels that she had, the Bible reveals to us how she then sold the oil that she had, and she remained with some money that was now able to sustain her and her children for the time to come. which means to say when you find value in the small that you're holding and you build capacity for it, it's not just going to answer your current problem, but it's also going to sustain you for the times to come. Never stop growing. Never limit your potential by stopping growing. The miracle you're looking for is always available. Success is always available. Success is just not finding room enough for what you've created. Unpack anything that is in you that is not adequate for the success that you want. Leave capacity. Remember process, remember time. And eventually you will see that the space that you would have created will now allow a wonder of possibilities to arise in you. It is essential for us to realize this truth at a very young age. Sometimes it is true, the older you get, the less the hunger you have. Even physically, it's true. So build that hunger now and fill it in with the potential that you want to see. Thank you so much for joining us in this particular episode. We continuously want to engage with you. We continuously want to learn from you. Remember, as we always say, no man is an epitome of knowledge. But if what you know and what I know, what your neighbor's quest is based on what they know, is mixed together, we are going to build knowledge that can transform not only a generation, but that can set us all to build something even for generations to come. Comment and talk to us. Tell us what you think. Tell us what we can do to improve that which we are speaking, and also other topics that we can cover that could be effective. We always desire to hear from you. That's how we also grow. And as we let out more, that's how you also grow. And we all are able to contribute to the society. Thank you so much. Until we meet again in the next episode. Cheers.